All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our little virtual event space. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Allie. If you're local, you might recognize me from our Lake Forest Park location. And I'm so excited to be introducing Keith and Chenoa Egawa here to discuss their new book, The Whale Child. So before I get into the fun stuff, I just want to really quickly thank everyone for coming out, for showing up, and for our readers and speakers here for coming and talking about their new book with us. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and for coming into the store and for buying books. Your guys' support really is what keeps this whole place possible. And we really love what we do. So if you guys love what we do, please do come in, say hi, and buy this book. You're gonna like it. So if you're not local, we do ship. Shipping is like $3.50, and you also get to support USPS. So, added bonus. And I will be linking the book in the chat, so you can go ahead and grab it pretty easily. While you're over on the website, I definitely recommend checking out our other upcoming events. We do a lot of really fun stuff right now, and all of it is online, so it's really easy to get to. We have a weekly newsletter that I definitely recommend signing up for. We'll let you know who is coming, who is speaking, great books that are coming out soon, other fun events that are happening in the bookstore. And of course, if you want to follow us, we are at Third Place Books on all of the major social media platforms, and that'll just be the quickest updates and recommendations. So we are going to be here for about an hour. And towards the end, we're going to be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we hope very much that you do, go ahead and leave those in the box. There's a Q&A box up in the corner here, either at the top or at the bottom. Yeah, hit us. We love it. We love hearing from you. There's also a little chat over here, so speak up. We love it. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Keith and Chenoa Egawa. Keith Egawa is a novelist who focuses on both adult and children's literature. He is a Washington native and member of the Lumi tribe, an Indian nation. Egawa's extensive experience in the field of child welfare has provided him with both inspiration and insight into his subject matter. And Chenoa Egawa is Coast Salish of the Lummi and S'Klallam nations of Washington State. She is a medicine woman, singer, writer, illustrator, photographer, and teacher dedicated to bringing healing to our Mother Earth and to people of all origins. Their book, The Whale Child, is about a young whale who agrees to become human in order to teach Alex, a young Coast Salish girl, about the living spirit of water and how to use the teaching of her ancestors to be a caregiver of the earth. So thank you both so much for being here. And I'm gonna leave them in your hands.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you to Third Place Books. Thanks, Em, for being here. I just wanted to open, thank you everyone who tuned in. I just want to open with a song before we get started with the reading. This is a song just to remember all of our ancestors, all of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents on back. They made the way for us to all be here. So just remembering them and all their teachings and their stories and their songs and their prayers that they had. So this is the Ancestors Honor Song.
Thanks, Chenoa.
Yes.
So, as some of you may have noticed, yeah, we just have to deal with those moments when the sound cuts out and there's the little the video delay. So I apologize for that. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into reading you some selections from the story, and we'll just start at the beginning, and then we'll have time when we stop reading to take questions and have some discussion. And at that time, we can talk more about the overall story and the messages and what we're trying to teach and convey, because of course that's pretty limited by just reading part of it. But yeah, if you pay close attention and listen, the story's told with fable and magic, but listen for and think about connections you see to your world, to the real world, to challenges that are out there right now, and challenges that you may possibly be facing down the road. So starting with chapter 1. In our world today, there lives a whale child, born not so long ago in the waters of the South Pacific Ocean. You may have seen him from the shore, off in the distance, swimming with his mother. Like all children, he came into the world with kindness in his soul, an eagerness to learn, and the open mind of a newborn. He arrived with the strength of all the ancestors who came before him, and many other gifts yet to be realized. His name arose from the movements of the great sea, and the light reaching down through the water, sparkling beneath the waves, though it is a name that cannot be pronounced with our human voices. Sunlight dances, shines, and shimmers upon the water's surface as the whale child passes by. And when he is close, the countless creatures of the world's oceans feel hope within the currents made by the movements of his fins. And they all sense he is special. Bright light twinkles within the inky blackness of the whale child's eyes, as if the stars came down from their home in the night sky to rest there in his gentle gaze. From the earliest days of his life, the whale child's mother taught him the language of the sea through timeless songs that carry the stories and wisdom of life on earth. She told him how water is the source of life. Not only the dark and salty water of their ocean home, but the water that flows sweet and clear over the land, the water that sits in still lakes, ponds, and marshes, and the water that falls down to us from the sky. All of these many pathways joining together to create the living veins of our planet. Listen and remember, said the whale child's mother. Earth's waters are sacred, as all living things must have water to survive. Listen and remember. All creatures of the ocean were healthy and strong, back when clean waters could carry a song to the ears of others far away in bountiful oceans through dark night and bright day. But now I will show you things that are happening in the sea and on land, and you, my child, you will share what you learn. The whale child remained with his mother in the warm southern waters of his birth until he had built up plenty of insulating fat for the icy Arctic. Then his mother led him on the long journey north, and there they spent the spring and summer months in the cold northern waters, swimming alongside the coastline by glaciers and sea ice. There they fed on small fish, plankton, and tiny shrimp called krill that appeared within the ocean in groups as large and numerous as clouds in the sky. She taught her child to swim straight up toward the surface beneath the swirling schools of krill, using the brushy filters the whales have in their mouths, called baleen, to filter the tiny creatures from the water. She also taught him to stay clear of ships and boats that could strike and kill a whale. She taught him to recognize and avoid fishing nets that could entangle a whale's body and fins. At all times, she kept her baby close by her side, often reaching out and touching him with a giant flipper to make sure he was close and protected. To the whale child, the beauty and abundance of his world were endless. As he glided through the water, never far from the protective shadow of his mother, he was safe and happy, and he would show his joy in the same way he'd seen his mother and other whales clear of the surface and crashing back down with enormous, thunderous splashes. The whale child and his mother traveled great distances, following their migratory paths, back and forth between the warm blue waters near the equator and those that were dark green and very cold farther north. Along the way, his mother began showing him things happening to their ocean world. because of the people who lived on the land. Along the way, she showed him how things were changing. One evening, off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, a pod of orcas passed with soundless speed, racing smoothly toward the next hunting ground. And here, not far from shore, the whale child and his mother decided to rest for the night. And it was here that the whale child asked his mother, "What things have I learned? What things will I share?" "Do you know how to survive?" his mother answered. "And do you know what things you need in order to continue surviving? Do you remember all that you've seen on our travels?" "Yes," nodded the whale child. "Then you also know what all other living things need to survive. And there is more you know that you have not yet considered or remembered." As the mother and her child floated peacefully at the surface, resting from their travels, the whale child dreamed. In his dream, the moonlight reached down into the deep ocean, and he saw a human woman in the distance swimming toward him. Her long dark hair flowed out behind her and rippled in the current like smooth black seaweed. The whale child knew this was more than a dream. He knew that it was showing him what was to come. He did not yet know how or why, but he knew this woman would soon welcome him onto the shore of the human world. When his mother awoke, she confided, "I had the same dream as you, and what you dreamed was true. You have family on land as you do in the sea. We are all connected. We are all related. Now, my son, you will walk on 2 feet as men do, and you will meet a woman and her daughter where the surf meets the sand. The woman is your human mother. The little girl is your human sister. To this little girl, you will pass on our teachings, and by helping her, she will in turn help others. Tomorrow's sun rises, you will emerge from the sea as a human boy, and you will show your little sister that being a caretaker of the earth begins with taking care of the water that all life depends on. Your visit on land will be very short, but during the quickly passing time, you will show her that she can help overcome the things you and I have seen in our travels, one smart step at a time." "But that seems impossible," marveled the whale child. His mother made a slight movement of her powerful fin, drifting closer until her eye was right next to his. "Now listen carefully," she said. "The spirit of the ocean moves within every drop of water, traveling the globe within the largest and smallest of currents. It lives within the bubbling, roiling waves, within the sea foam on the still surface, and down into the deepest trenches carved in the ocean floor. This spirit has been with us and around us since the beginning of all things, and during every part of your travels by my side. It has witnessed your happiness and your reactions to the bad things you have seen when you looked upon the many threats to life in the ocean. It has seen that you are not disheartened and do not give up in the face of difficulty and challenge. So, of all the creatures of the ocean, the water spirit has chosen you for what will happen next. It has chosen you to carry the wisdom and memory, not only of all the whales who came before you, but the wisdom and memory of the vast ocean world and its connections to life on dry land. It has chosen you to share this wisdom with the humans, who will be responsible for what happens to the earth. The spirit of the ocean knows that you are perfect for the task at hand." Before the whale child could ask his mother more about what all this meant, the tiny bioluminescent lights that glitter throughout the ocean gathered around him. The water swirled and churned, forming the shape of the water spirit. And as the whale child watched in amazement, the water spirit reached out with a long arm of seawater and starlight and gently touched him on the top of his head. Then the whale child began to change. He shrank and grew skinny as his thick hide became thin. The deep gray of his body faded until soon he was the color of the humans on the shore, and his skin reflected the lights that swirled around him, making him glow within the deep shadows of the ocean, like the lure of an anglerfish. His fins became arms, and where his powerful tail had been, there were now 2 human legs kicking to keep his new body afloat. His eyes moved forward from the sides of his head, and soon he was looking toward the beach where the humans lived. Then the water spirit disappeared. The water became dark and calm again, and the whale child was a boy paddling about in the deep ocean. Go ashore now, my son, the mother whale pressed fondly. They are expecting you. Take with you all of my love and confidence, and I will remain out here to watch over you from the bay. At that, the boy swam toward the shore, and each time he poked his head up from the water, he could see the hulking shapes of hills and mountains in the distance growing closer. When the water was nearly shallow enough for him to stand, he ran face first into a pair of old surf shorts floating on the surface. I guess this is lucky, he thought aloud. A human losing his shorts in the ocean and me finding them. He had seen people before and the clothing they put on their bodies. So for the first time he stood on his new legs. How strange is this, he muttered, as he awkwardly climbed into the shorts, one leg and then the other, feeling the gritty sand against his feet. Although he could wade the rest of the distance to the beach, he slipped back beneath the surface and swam forward, feeling the weight of the unknown upon him. But the comfort of his mother's love remained strong and steady within each beat of his heart as he made his way through the push and pull of the shifting tides. And he was not afraid.
So we'll continue to chapter 2. A little girl named Alex lived a content and happy life in the Pacific Northwest, close to the seashore with her mother and father. It was a place of tall green trees and water all around. Her mother's people were called Coast Salish, and they lived in this place further back than history could remember. Her father's people were Polynesian, and they came from a distant island in the South Pacific. Both sides of Alex's family had important ties to the land and sea. Her great-grandparents and the generations before them knew that living in harmony with nature would ensure a healthy future and plentiful world for the children yet to come. But when Alex was born, the respect and understanding that her ancestors held dear needed to be remembered by the living. Alex's mind was as sharp as a little fishhook, but she had not yet thought about things that might be wrong with her world and the future. One night, Alex's mother had a dream. In this dream, she swam out into the ocean toward a mother whale with her baby. In her dream, the baby whale turned into a human boy and she welcomed him ashore. From her dream, she knew that this boy would share important gifts with her daughter. She knew that Alex would truly listen and understand. She knew Alex would share what she learned with a waiting world of young minds and open ears. When she awoke, she walked down to her daughter's room. As it was a summer night, it was still hot inside the house. Alex had slid out of bed in her sleep to escape the heat of her blankets, so she was splayed on the rug like an exhausted lizard. In one hand, she held a stuffed sheep named Sheepy, and in the other, she clutched a half-eaten donut she'd sneaked during the night. Wake up, Alex, her mother shook her gently. There's something we must go see, and she walked her daughter down to the beach in the dark. As the sun rose from behind the mountains to the east, Alex and her mother stood side by side watching the changing colors of dawn light up the surface that rolled back and forth upon the glistening sand. Alex looked out toward the horizon and believed she saw two whale tails in the distance, one big and one small, breaking the surface and then disappearing. Then Alex heard the haunting notes of a whale song drifting in on the tide. The song gradually grew louder, then stopped, and as she and her mother watched and waited, a human boy came up from the ocean. Who is that? Alex asked. He is the boy I dreamed of, her mother answered. He is your brother from the water, the boy who comes from the whales. Alex knew whales held a special place in the stories and legends of both her mother's and father's people. Elders called them the people who live under the water, and they represented the strength of community and working together. They could inspire happiness and luck, and she even heard that sometimes the presence of a whale meant that you were protected on your travels. But still, her mother's words were hard to believe. My brother from the whales, blurted Alex. But that seems impossible. He must be a boy who fell off a boat or went for a late night swim and lost his way, swept down the shoreline by a riptide. As Alex's mother watched the boy make his way toward them, she too was astounded by what she saw. But in a calm voice, she said to her little girl, magic such as this has always existed in the world. And nature will now teach you ancient and eternal truths for a better future. This boy is here to share lessons with a child of pure heart and open mind. So you must listen closely to what he says, for that special child is you, and his visit will pass quickly. Alex felt the truth of this, and her disbelief faded. She nodded and approached the boy with the comfort and kindness that children are born with and adults often forget. "What's your name?" she asked. The boy spat out a big mouthful of water, seaweed, and sand. He blinked his eyes, then said, "Do you know how the sunlight shines on the waves when you look out over the ocean?" "Yes," said Alex, "I know it well." "Well, in my language, the language of the sea, my name means sunlight that shines into the deep ocean." "That's a very long name. I will call you Shiny," declared Alex. To that, the boy nodded his head and smiled, showing big chunks of green seaweed still stuck in his front teeth. "So you are a whale," Shiny confirmed. Alex nodded slowly, her eyes wide and the beginnings of a smile on her lips. "But that seems impossible," said Shiny. "Yup, seems impossible." Shiny looked back over his shoulder. "But here I am." He gestured toward the ocean. "And I came from far out there." Alex thought about her mother's words of magic in the world, and this was happening before her very eyes after all. So Alex replied, "Oh, I believe it. I said it seems impossible, not that it is impossible. And here you are, and here we are together." Just then, a small shape appeared in the sky above their heads. It moved from inland, heading toward the sea, and Alex flinched when the winged shadow dove down toward them before gliding out over the bay. The silhouette quacked loudly with a croak like a toad with a frog in its throat, and Alex realized it was a duck, already awake and on the wing. "Go find a nice little pond to float in," she called out to the bird, "before you crash into the ocean and get swallowed by a goosefish." Shiny smiled and nodded his head, but said nothing as he watched the duck pass by. Chapter 3.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Okay, so chapter 3. So we have time to start into this, and then I'll hopefully pay attention to the clock and stop in time to make sure we can take some questions.
Okay.
So I will go for a few minutes here in chapter 3. Shiny slept for a while, snoring and gurgling like a walrus with a bad cold. When he awoke later that morning, he found that Alex had not gone back to sleep, and she was instead patiently watching and waiting for him to get up. She had retrieved some clothes from one of her older cousins, and they were in a neatly folded pile at Shiny's feet, so that he could choose from the stack of hand-me-downs. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "A little odd, to be honest," said Shiny. "That's understandable," acknowledged Alex. "After all, you did lose over 1,000 pounds since yesterday. Probably not easy to adjust to such sudden skinniness." Shiny held his thin arms out in front of him and wiggled his 10 fingers like a nest of restless bugs. "Yes, a drastic difference indeed." Alex led Shiny to her thinking tree, where she often sat and looked out over the ocean, thinking thoughts of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. "So, tell me about your visit," said Alex. "Mom says you have important teachings to share in a very short time." "Ah, yes," said Shiny, "teachings about water and how all life depends on it. I will show you the paths that water follows." "The paths?" wondered Alex. "What paths?" Shiny considered her question, then asked, "Where does your drinking water come from, Alex?" "Straight out of the faucet," she replied. Shiny laughed. "There's much more to it than that. Listen. The rain comes down and goes into the ground. It sits in pools and lakes. And way up high to nearly the sky, huge glaciers water makes. It freezes, it melts, it evaporates, and up in the clouds it waits." Alex pondered. "Not sure what that's all about. I think you better show me." "That's the plan," said Shiny. "And I will show you how people are interrupting and destroying these paths. These things are there for everyone to see, but seeing doesn't seem to be enough." "Enough for what?" asked Alex. "Enough to make humans change their behavior and not take the health of water for granted." Okay then, my brother from the sea, said Alex. Let's go see these teachings. From the moment Shiny had stepped onto the beach and stood before her, Alex felt comfort in his presence, despite the unusual nature of his arrival and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She felt safe and at peace when Shiny stood close by. Come along with me, said Shiny, and I will show you. At the edge of the village, Alex paused in an open space on the outskirts of the forest. She listened and she waited. Shiny pointed in all directions. Ah, the natural world, he marveled. Creatures and spirits and fantastic forces unseen. It may seem as simple and familiar as the rock and the tree, but it is full of powerful mystery. Like magic, said Alex. Yes, exactly that, said Shiny. Now, let your mind be silent and still as you listen and learn. Let your heart be open. The natural world is alive, beautiful, and giving, but it can be lost when people do not take care of it. I will show you how things are changing in very bad ways. I don't believe I'd like to see those things, Alex shuddered. And to this Shiny answered, in the time we're now living, you have no choice but to see them, because to ignore these difficult things is to let them keep happening. Shiny saw that Alex looked dismayed at the thought of losing her beautiful and giving world, so he put his hand on her shoulder. Do not lose hope, he added. Seeing what is bad will make you realize the good you can do. Take one smart step in the right direction, and the next will come much easier. Just then, a little duck with an extra large head landed next to them on the grass. He stretched his short wings and squawked loudly. Then he pecked at Alex's foot, his beak making thumping noises against her rubber boot. Hey, I know that croak in my bones, exclaimed Alex. You're the duck who flew over our heads this morning on the beach. The duck quacked again, to which Shiny answered, Yes, of course. Come along with us and help bring the world into view. Bufflehead, meet Alex. And Alex, meet Bufflehead. And Bufflehead, stop chewing on her boot. Alex frowned and looked doubtfully at the bold little bird, but she said nothing and followed Shiny.
I'll go ahead and read a couple more pages. So we're into chapter 4. Shiny and Alex quickly became friends, and as they traveled the countryside through grassy fields and shady forests, it was as though they had always known one another. When midday arrived, they stopped on a sandy beach to rest. Alex found a log where a brown lizard was sunning himself, and she sat down and emptied her lunch bag. She set aside a little cupcake with blue frosting and ate a cheese sandwich and an apple. But since Shiny was still a whale at heart, he dove back into the ocean, chasing after shrimp and small fish. Alex watched him slipping and darting within the waves, and when she noticed Bufflehead next to her, she gave him a crust of her sandwich. Eat up, Buffly, and don't sit on that little reptile creeping down the log. Alex noticed that Bufflehead ignored the lizard and kept his head cocked sideways, with his little black eye focused on her. So she concentrated to see if she too could make him speak so that she could understand, as Shiny seemed to do. But no words or sounds came from the duck. Once Shiny had gotten his fill, he came out of the water and walked up to the log where Alex and Bufflehead waited. That's a lot of strong smelling sea life you just ate out there, said Alex. Do whale boys brush their teeth? Whales don't, and boys do, said Shiny. So I guess whale boys are a little confused about it. Alex had taken a few steps down toward the shore to look out over the ocean, and now she turned away from the water to look back at Shiny. Did you just eat my cupcake? She asked. No. Then how come your mouth is all blue? Shiny laughed and shook his hair dry like a dog. I'm sorry, I had to test it, he said, to see what kinds of foods you humans are eating. Then his face grew serious as he looked slowly up and down the shoreline. Look there on the beach, Alex. Fish and birds getting tangled in nets that are left to drift. Some have eaten garbage and died. Even the small things that people toss to the ground here and there without thinking add up to very big problems. Did you know most of the plastic that's made, used, and then thrown away by humans ends up in the sea? Thousands and thousands of heaps and piles and miles, tons and tons of plastic garbage out there choking the world's oceans. I've seen it myself. I swam through it. around it, and beneath it while traveling with my mother. Alex looked down the beach and saw dead fish and birds scattered across the sand. She could see the pieces of plastic they had eaten. She saw a bird that had become entangled in nets. She saw a crab with his claw caught in a plastic soda pop ring. She looked out toward the waves and saw more litter floating and bobbing in the shallows. I'm sorry to show you such sad, frightening things, mumbled Shiny. Being here with you is more fun than I could have known. But I was allowed this visit because the world has become such a dangerous place. Remember what I said earlier. If we do not learn about everything we face in life, both good and bad, light and dark, then we are ignoring the truth. To look at the world honestly is to see difficulty that is there. Alex nodded and sighed heavily, but still had a frown on her face. Shiny stepped forward to look her in the eye. Alex, we don't stop laughing just because there is bad in the world, and we don't ignore the bad so we can keep laughing. And Alex, never stop enjoying the blue cupcakes. You mean enjoy the cupcakes when a whale boy doesn't eat them first? Both kids laughed loudly, and the sound could be heard in all directions, far down the beach and out over the ocean. Now, with a smile on her face, Alex said, I'm okay, cupcake thief. Let's see something else. Maybe we should pause there for questions. So we were wondering if anyone in the audience has questions for us so far, or about the book, or anything from my brother and I.
Well, I would love to know about the process of working on this book. How was the partnership on it?
Chenoa, do you want to jump in?
So about 6 years ago, my brother and I started working on this story, and it was inspired by just the beauty of all children. And one of our family members, our nephew, was born 18 years ago. And there was a beautiful dream that inspired this book because his mother, our sister, my brother and I's sister, she had this dream about the whale, and she was swimming in the ocean just as it is in the story. And she came upon this big whale and swam up to the eye of the whale. And she looked into the eye, and she said that it was looking back at her. And then all of a sudden, everything in the eye went black. And in that blackness, there appeared a small baby's eye. And it had this little funny blink, and it would look back at her, and then it would close its eyelid, and the eyelid would kind of stick together, and then it'd pop back open. And it was very distinct. And so she noticed that. And then right after that part, she woke up, and she knew that the baby was coming. She forgot all about the dream. And when the baby was born and she held him for the first time, he had that blink from the dream. And that's when she remembered the dream. This is that little whale child that I saw in that dream. And so we wanted to write this story to help him to remember the beauty of what it is to be on this earth and to be alive here at this time with our families and with each other and with the nature, the natural world. And other children in our family had come along as we were writing this story. They were born, and we wanted the children of the world to understand the different challenges of taking care of the environment so that we have clean water and clean air and plenty of forests and plenty of nature space and a connection to the earth and to the plants, and let the children remember that they're alive and that this world is very giving. It's very generous. The nature is very generous. But through our teachings as from our ancestors and from our elders, they told us about how to take care of those relationships, that we always have to have respect and honor and make offerings when we harvest plants or foods, or, take care of, not throw things in the water that are going to contaminate the water. And so there's a lot of things that we wanted the children to know, so that together we could be caretakers of the earth and ensure a beautiful future for all the children that are here now and the ones that haven't even been born yet. And so this book was inspired in part by those things.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't actually remember which one came first, but yeah, so we were really inspired by that dream, but we weren't sure exactly what we were going to do with it. And I don't know if it was before, or at the same time, or right after. But yeah, like Chenoa was mentioning, we were really, it was really important for us to write a story for young readers about the things she talked about the the way to live with the environment, with the earth, to make sure that it lasts, that it's there for future generations. And so we wanted to introduce young readers to the serious threats that we're in the middle of right now environmentally. So there was that message to teach to kids, or to get kids to start thinking about, and hopefully inspire you to learn more about it. And then we also had that dream of our sisters, and the two merged together, and we were like, what a perfect vehicle for the story. That that amazing the child coming from the whales, and it kind of just moved on from there. And we would get together a lot and talk a lot and look over drafts and say, oh, what do you think about this idea? Should we add this? Should we expand on that? Should we have a whole scene about a river and the salmon and pollution and what have you? And so the working together was really collaborative. And same with the illustrations as well. We did about I think 70 something of them total, and I don't remember how many are in the story, but it's probably about half that. But that's an important part of the process, because we're bringing the story to life, even if in some ways it's just for ourselves, because a certain painting doesn't make it into the story, but it still is that process of what is it, what does the story look like, what do these people look like, and what does the ocean look like at night, hundreds of feet down. So yeah, the collaborative working together was really key to the final product, the final story.
We have a question in the chat that says, could you talk about the relationship that Alex has with Polynesian ancestors? Is there a real connection between Polynesia and the Pacific Northwest people? And so for that, we actually within our family have that connection. One of our grandfathers on my father's side came from the Hawaiian Islands and was Japanese Hawaiian. And then in the dream, and then Shiny, the whale child's people also come from, the South Pacific, Polynesia, Samoa. And so we wanted to have those integrated into the story. And there's another connection with just the whale in the dream that my sister saw, was the way she looked it up, and she said it looked like this, and she went through and she looked at different whales, and she knew that it was a humpback whale. And she said that the water was tropical, and so we made it in the story that the whale child comes from the humpback whales, and we don't state it in the book, but there's drawings of the humpback. And the migratory path of the humpback whales goes, there's the birthing grounds are in the Hawaiian Islands, and then they travel up to Alaska and feed in the Arctic on the krill and the shrimp, and then they travel back to Hawaii. So they make that long migratory path, and the peoples have also made those journeys. There's a lot of intermarriage between the Hawaiian natives and Coast Salish people, and up into Alaska too. And so that is a real connection there. Yeah.
And so the birth of our nephew that Chenoa mentioned, so that nephew, he's half Samoan. So that inspired it as well. And like Chenoa mentioned, with the huge migratory paths of humpback whales, that was crucial, because remember, Shiny's mother, as they're traveling the earth, in the oceans, she's pointing out these different, bad, concerning things that are happening in the ocean, due to people. And so those long travels by the humpback whale was also a perfect setting for, for the mother to be showing Shiny, this stuff is happening all throughout the world as you've seen on our travels. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Are there any other questions?
So here's one from Bevan. There's always a sense among some adults that kids are too idealistic and will grow out of it as they grow up. Do you have any advice for young people who are struggling to know what to do next, or get the adults in their lives to take them seriously?
Do you want to start with that?
Go ahead.
So I would say that children have a natural affinity for the natural world, and they understand the way that we were describing it in the book. All children come into the world with curiosity and an open mind and an open heart. And they like kindness, and they like learning new things, and they like interacting with nature. And so I think it's we need to foster those things within our kids, so that we can see there are so many opportunities for our children to learn about the natural world, and to meet and talk with each other about some of the solutions that need to be had. One of the examples that we give in classes is even talking about the simplicity of a bottle of water, and looking at what are we using in our daily life. When we talk about water being a sacred element, water is alive. Water has a spirit, as we say in this book. We're talking about that relationship. And when you get up in the morning, I know for me, the first thing I do is I drink a glass of water. And then I cook food, and sometimes I take a shower, and it's all, I'm using water all the time. But I'm not really, if I'm not aware of where the water is coming from, and the journey and the pathway of water on this earth, and that the water that's here on this earth has the same quantity of water, has been here since the beginning of time. And the water has the wisdom of traveling the earth and circulating and cleansing itself and purifying itself and being generous and kind and giving its life to nourish all the plants and animals from the top of the mountain all the way down the mountainside, under the earth, up on top of the earth, all the way down to the oceans. And we need to take care of our water. And so I think that one of the things that kids could do is just looking at, I know just a simple thing is, do you drink water out of a plastic bottle? And is plastic recyclable? And it's not. It can be repurposed sometimes, but it's not always. Even sometimes it just goes straight into the garbage. And so looking at, the water, it has a living spirit. It has wisdom, because it's known how to cleanse and give life from the beginning of time to everything on this earth. And so I just challenge the kids to, bring a container that you can keep reusing, and stop buying plastic, because there's ways that we can contribute through our actions in our daily life. So paying attention to what we consume in our day, and where does it come from, and where does it go once it leaves our home or our possession? Does it go into the garbage? Does it create problems? And so I think that working with children and adults to set these kinds of goals with our kids is a wonderful thing to begin to discuss with them. Did you want to say anything, Keith?
Yeah, no, Bevan. So I think that people, human beings have so many faults, but I honestly believe what my life has shown me is that the time that human beings are as close to perfect as we can get is when we're kids, as young people, and just some examples are just that being non-judgmental, open-mindedness, that unbelievable ability and desire to learn, and to appreciate small things that really aren't small things, but to adults they may seem like small things, but kids notice them, they appreciate them, they're interested in them. So so yeah, we do tend to lose a lot of that as we grow up. And so yeah, my just quick message to answer that question would be that do everything you can to hang on to those qualities, those strengths that you have as a kid that all kids are born with. And it's like I said, that's the time when human beings are the most admirable, is kids.
So I'm seeing a question here from Claudia. How long did this project take from the time you started the book to its publication? And B, is it a traditionally published book or a self-published?
So I think this, the book took about 6 years from the time we were talking about it to completion, because my brother and I both work other jobs. And then just because the story just keeps evolving, and the artwork kept evolving. And so it ended up, we had this question the other day, and Keith thought it was 2 years. And I said, no, I think it's more like 6 years. And so it took a while. And then the great news is it's traditionally published from North Atlantic Books. And we were so happy to have them as a publisher, and been working with them to just be able to get the story out and do some readings. And so yes, it's published by a real publishing company, North Atlantic Books. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
No, please, you go.
I was just going to say, yes, with 6 years. I can't believe that it was that long. But the first, I would say the actual first complete draft, the rough, story beginning to end, probably took maybe right around a year. But then the rewriting and the adding and the lengthening and adjusting and fine tuning, that's the biggest process. It's the first front to end writing of a story, of a book, is actually not the longest part. But yeah, go ahead with your question.
Oh, I was just going to ask, is there like a path of books that sort of led you to writing this book? Or further reading that you feel influenced this work?
I think Keith can answer the book part. I would say that our traditional storytelling, a lot of our native stories, they're known as the teachings. It's part of our oral tradition. Before languages were written, most of our native languages are oral, and have just started to become written through the creation of an international phonetic alphabet. But teachings were remembered through stories, and the stories would have, it's very much alive, the storytelling, have different characters, and some of them are characters that show you what to do, and some of them are characters that show you what not to do. And so the teachings that, like, for instance, in the story, there's the salmon, as salmon people here in the Northwest, with the Coast Salish tribes, we acknowledge the salmon also as the people who live in villages beneath the ocean, and that there are certain rules and agreements that were made between the humans and the animals and the fish and all the different creatures, that the humans would be able to eat the animals and the fish, but there had to be a respect and a care and a gratitude and an appreciation. Never, you always have to make an offering and give thanks for that, the salmon that you're going to be harvesting or fishing. And you have to only take what you need. You have to share it with people who can't fish for themselves. And you need to take care of the health of the water, because that is their home place, and also intimately our home place as well. So I think that for for me, a lot of the story came from some of our traditional teachings and the recognition of the living nature of the world, you know, that everything has a life and a spirit and a quality, a personality. So Keith also can mention some books, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say that's perfect because because that traditional storytelling is a huge inspiration for this type of story, but also we really were aware of wanting this to be very universal to for it to connect with everyone. So yeah, so what Chenoa said is very true. That's a huge part of it, and then I would also say. Going back to traditional like European folklore and fairy tales, like Grimm's the Grimm stories. That's something that definitely inspired me. My memory of it as a kid. So even that type of feel. That I think has a presence in this story, in this type of story. So yeah, I can't really list specific because there aren't like specific stories that inspired it, but yeah, but there is that general, what Chenoa said, and then just I would say, a large body of even European fairy tale type stories.
All right, so it looks like we have another question from Claudia. Was it easy to find an agent to get it published because your subject of conservation is timely?
Maybe we should have Emily answer that one.
It's not.
What's that?
I was just going to say, so it's not.
It was sort of miraculous how it happened, because I think when something is meant to be in the world, it has magical pathways of getting there. And I had a friend who published a book through North Atlantic, and I just talked to him and I said, "Do you think that they'd be interested in reading our book?" And he said, let me find out. And so he wrote them an email, and they said, "Go ahead and send the book in." And then we ended up getting the book published. Maybe it was 2 years later. So there was a process there too. But that was word of mouth from a friend. And so it was a very special kind of connection, and some people can query publishers for so long and never even get a response. And so there was something really magical about that. Keith, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, so if the question, if the person who asked the question is kind of thinking of writing and publication, so we actually didn't have an agent for this project, but so a novel that I had published many years ago, so I did take that route of having an agent, and they do the thing where they query publishers and reach out and hopefully get your work looked at. So for this book, we didn't have an actual an agent, but I did take that route with a previous work.
All right, so I've got a question here. I recently watched a video of storyteller Roger Fernandez sharing Salmon Boy. In his introduction, he mentions that he is the teller, but it is up to the listeners to find their own lessons in the story. Some may be obvious, but I wonder what lessons you in particular hoped readers take away from your book.
First of all, we know Roger. He's a lifetime friend. We've known him since we were kids, so he's a wonderful storyteller. And let's see. So some of the obvious that the things that we take for granted, that we need to take a closer look. There's a lot of amazing things about our lives that we just take for granted. And like I said, getting up in the morning and being able to take a glass of water and to drink a glass of water is something that is not possible for people all over this planet at this time. Some people have contaminated water or very little water, and we need to take care of it. We have I hope that we can come to teach about the responsibility of taking care of that which we love together, that we can do it together, that we really need to do it together from all walks of life. And children, like my brother said, are the hope, because they are so open, and they see the right thing to do and they want to do it. And and so I think that I want the lessons to be that all life matters. The creatures and the plants, and the animals and the birds, the people, we're all a part of this world, and we all the health of one is the health of all. And so the health of our water, it directly determines the health of ourself, because that water we take into our body, and if that water is not clean, then our body will become sick. And so and that we need to recognize that, I think in our native tradition, we know that water is one of the sacred elements, that from the beginning of time in our creation stories, that it was the water that formed around the fire that burns at the center of the earth, and the water, through a process of condensation, that formed around it. It's both the fire, the water, the air, the sun, the moon, the stars, the plants, the animals. Everything is sacred. Everything is sacred. And so to look deeper, that if we could inspire children and their families to look deeper into the beauty and mystery of life for each thing. And in this story, we talk about the water, but everything is connected. Everything is connected. Keith, go ahead.
No, that's that. I would, yeah, I wouldn't have a lot to add. That's exactly what I would say, and just the hope that, because the story really, it's an introduction to problems, to challenges that are real, that we're facing now. And you hear people say it all the time. We have to make changes, and we have to take action if there's going to be a livable world for future generations. So I would say, so the book, gives you an introduction to that, but I would hope that when you read it, that it inspires you to learn more about that subject, or to learn more in general, and read, and try to, even if it takes willpower, set down, games you may enjoy, or, I don't know, social media things that you may enjoy and eat up a lot of time. Make a point of investigating, looking into the world around you, learning about it, researching, and the more, the smarter you get, the more knowledge you accumulate, the more you're aware of, the truth of the world around you. You're going to know the right thing to do. You're going to be able to make the decision for yourself about what to do about it. So the book is just an introduction to, and hopefully an inspiration to to better yourself, to learn.
So shoehorning off of that, Claudia is asking, do you know of any organizations that we, your readers, can join to help promote cleaner water worldwide?
So I think there's a lot that's happening locally here. I don't know if our audience is local, but I know that people are working together in the schools, and through the tribes and environmental organizations, all the different local environmental organizations. There's a unification that's happening. And so I would investigate those in your local area and see where the connections are, because I think a lot of people are starting to come together from all different walks of life. And I think also your voice is important, as far as asking for things that you see that you want to be different. Like even going into the stores, sometimes I just say, hey, all these green beans came in bulk. Why did you have to put them in this big plastic bag in order to sell them to me? And so just as consumers, our children and our parents, our families, we have a voice where we can say, we would like to not have those things, the extra plastic. And so knowing that your voice is important, and that what you see and that what you know is important, and to speak and to stand up for what you know is right. And I wish I had the name of more organizations offhand, but I will definitely put that list together next time. But those are
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
don't. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, sorry, I don't, nothing that I could add to that. I'd have to look into it.
I think
right.
one thing I would like to say about that is I know there's a huge movement going on with the farmlands, you know, and that there's new, I think it's old information that's known by a lot of different cultures around the earth, but looking at how our foods are grown too. There's organizations that are trying to restore our soils. You know, how do you, soil is a living being too. It's filled with microorganisms that allow carbon to be stored in the soil. And when we clear lands, then we create dust bowls, and nothing can grow there anymore. And so I think any kind of program that's also doing organic agriculture in your local area, growing your own garden and just discovering how a seed grows and how to nurture a plant and the beauty of what, you know, the bounty of the harvest. I think that there's some good work being done by different organizations that that talk about protection of soil. And there's ocean, you know, I would just look up the oceans to rivers network. There's the rivers, what is it? International Rivers Network. There's different organizations like that that are doing a lot of good work.
Oh, wonderful. So for the last question, do you guys have plans for future projects? Should we keep an eye for out for another book?
T, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. There isn't one in process, so there's not a concrete story idea that's being worked through. But absolutely, yeah, there'll always be more. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for coming and chatting with us. This is such important work, and I love to see what you guys have to say. And thank the audience for coming, for tuning in, for asking questions. This was wonderful. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you, third place book.
Yeah.
Keith and I have
really appreciate
it. Lake Forest Park. So
yeah.
And thank you to all the audience. Thank you, Emily. Thank you for being here. Bevan too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Okay, everybody
All
who has
righty.
questions, thank you so much. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Take care.
Take care. You too.